some of you who came today are also entrepreneurs, you're self-employed, or you've launched into your own ministry or businesses. And so we're glad that you're here, that you've helped to encourage our discussion, but also we hope to get your feedback. But we thought it would just be good to have a section where we could get different perspectives. And so I invited Andre and Zach to join us up here, and I have a few questions. And so I'm going to start by I think everyone knows these guys, or at least have met them today since we're a small group. But I'd like to, again, just give another short introduction and maybe share a little bit about themselves and their work and their ministries. So I'll start with you, Andre.
That's the benefit of having a second seat. Do you have to do something? Yes, it's on. So it's on. Okay. But I don't hear it on. Is it my soft voice? Okay, we need several people in support here. So 3 guys chipping in and all the mic works. That's great. Okay, my name is Andre. I'm 50 years old, and for 17 years I work as a certified financial planner now. So before that I was involved in sales of electronic components, which was not a very emotional product. So after a while I set off to have my own kind of business. And I was wondering first time when he asked me why he wants me to be here, and I wondered more about that when I heard how many companies are running, and I was like, hey, I'm just on my own, so what can I bring to the table? And it dawned on me while I was listening to you why I might give a little bit of a different perspective, because when we talk about entrepreneurs, I think we always think about people who start their business and then just take off, and then the rocket just flies, and the rocket just excels, and it never levels anywhere. And I think that's why I have a little bit of a different idea about entrepreneurship, and seeing my journey reflects that, because I think that was your question, which was interesting. Is it about the money or is it about the time? And I believe it's about both. And in my own journey, I've seen, of course, we know all when we start a business, we need to start putting in hours, because the plane's just on the ground, and then you start flying the plane and it's not really working well, so you have to mend it on the fly. But then it does fly, and then for me came a point where you have to decide, okay, are you going to invest more in your airplane so your airplane can fly higher and higher? Or do you come to a place where you say, okay, the plane is at a certain level, and that level, I would say, is income. Let's just say it's income. And then, of course, you can continue to invest in your airplane so it flies higher, you have more money, and then we can say, okay, we tithe more because we have more money. But the question is, what else can you bring to the church? And I think entrepreneur, that's I think where Aquila comes in. We need entrepreneurs in the churches. We need also their time. So the question is, can you, or should you, when you have your plane at a certain level, say, hey, that's an income that I can live with, and there comes in, we partner. Anne and I, we are partnered in this thing. So are we, as a family, aiming for more and more income? Or are we aiming at a certain lifestyle and say, okay, now we can cut back on time because we get more efficient over time. The airplane is flying, so we don't invest so much time to maintain a level of income that is okay for us. And now I'm involved in the church plant in Essen. And before that, I was involved in the church in leadership, and then say, hey, I can cut back on my work hours, say maybe I just work 4 or 3.5 days, whatever, and give that time and talent back to the Lord. And I think that's what dawned on me today when I was sitting here and listening to you and saying, hey, maybe what's my different story? And I think that's my different story, that I would say entrepreneurship gives me this freedom to invest the time. If I would be employed somewhere in a company, it's 9 to 5, and they don't give you time off to do this and this for your church, or let you work for 3 hours instead of 5. And now that I'm self-employed, I have that freedom to pour that into my church. So I think that's the perspective that I developed today, which was a nice gift to have. So that's my short story at this point.
I don't know if your question was what was the question again?
It was just an introduction.
Okay. I'm Zach. I'm 41, and I'm a freelancer, but now also a business owner. I started as a freelancer, so I rolled into the business world Um, Purely God. I always wanted to do business, and as long as I remember, I've been impacted by friends who have businesses and other friends who had this vision already, business in mission, as I was growing as a Christian, and I saw so much potential and through business how to impact the kingdom of God in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of sharing the gospel and all these two combines. I always found that a very good and combination using your talents and so many biblical examples or reference to that is such a proven model. So I was always inspired with that, but I actually rolled into that by being a freelancer for a French company. That's another whole story. Is God's sovereignty as well, how I um, became actually just an employee from Germany for a French company. But the beautiful thing about that is, as I got to know Nick, who was also a freelancer, and as a freelancer, you can have more customers. So we started to partner up. So we were starting to have collaborations and other customers. So it became a business, and now we have a company called Invisible Assistant that is now a digital agency, recently established as a company. Used to be just two freelancers with a brand name, but now it's officially a company. And by making that decision and really relying on God, we could immediately see how that really took off. But but what I learned and experienced, and I think not only experienced but also included, was my role within the church as a freelancer. I always was very active with the youth group here, and I used my time as a freelancer also for discipleship. Stain will remember that, and there are other guys. While I was working, he would come sometimes to my home. I give him a book, he would read in the living room, and then I go work, and then I take a break, and then I sit down with him, and then we will go over the questions and how's it going. And that gave me the freedom to manage my time for the kingdom of God, to disciple. And I believe it really brought up fruit, because it was not only for Stan, and so many other guys, and I see that was how God used me through my business for His kingdom, in that aspect at least.
So really we have three perspectives, three different journeys. One of the questions I wanted to talk about, I know there could be questions that you guys come up with for individuals or along the way, but like Andre, you were saying that you actually started your company by yourself even before you came to faith. And so it's a different decision, doing that as an unbeliever than becoming a Christian versus going into that thinking about ministry at the same time. And we've heard Dan's story. So how have your motivations, I like the way Dan talked about it. He talked about, like, I just want to be my own boss. I didn't want people telling me what to do. But how have your motivations to starting and stewarding a business changed as you've matured in your walk with the Lord?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely even probably worse than you when it comes to being obstinate and not wanting to be under someone. And I think a lot of people who work with me think I'm still the same way. I'm trying to change, but my way or the highway is I still would embrace that concept if I could, but I know it's not very biblical, so I'm trying to get better at that. So that was definitely a big part of my decision to go and be by myself. So, but of course, as you said, I was not a Christian at the time, so it was just a really selfish kind of motivation to start and go on of my own. So I think the decision to level the airplane, to come back to that picture, that was while I was a believer. So I think that was when God started to work at me and convinced me to say, hey, He's sovereign, so He guided my steps to be self-employed so I could make that decision later. So it was Him who made that decision that I would be self-employed, so I could come to that point in my life and do that.
My motivations were already for the kingdom when I started, but that doesn't mean that I already knew how that looked like, because I was learning what does it mean to be a Christian entrepreneur, what are my values, or what values should I, because I only had the old way of thinking business, making money, although you are a Christian, but you are influenced by entrepreneurial thinking, secular entrepreneurial thinking, or I don't know how you call it. But what my motivation became more stronger, and my conviction that this is such a good platform. So therefore, I was thinking through more like how am I going to conduct my business, my relationship with my colleagues, or certain jobs I would take, especially in the marketing world. Like there are some marketing jobs I would not take because the message is contra what I stand for. So I think my motivations to continue for the kingdom just became more mature as I continued. Maybe that answers the question. I don't know.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
No, I don't have any.
Yeah, I don't believe that. No thoughts, but going to reserve those
These
thoughts.
guys said, yeah.
So Dan, how would you say your motivations for, running a business have, what was the real question? How have they matured in terms of, as your faith has grown, how have your motivations in business matured over the years? Or changed? How has it changed your motives?
So the change. There you go.
Part of the chair.
What's on?
No, there's I know it's
One out there.
yeah, there's two.
Well, it's probably somewhat similar to Andre, where you start off and it's for self, and after a while you decide that's not very satisfying, and that you want to do something bigger than yourself. So that is the progression. As you achieve what you think you wanted to achieve, and what do I do now? It's kind of the part of the second half. So that's kind of the progression.
So to kind of turn it the other way, we talk about how, you guys are in a position in your life where you can kind of, Andre, you said it well, I got my business to a certain place where I have the freedom now to serve the church more. But looking at it from the other angle, how have you seen God use the gifts you've developed in business to serve the church?
I think in the former church I was in when I was treasurer. Of course, you like numbers, you like controlling things. So, okay, then you do the treasurer job. You know everything, you see everything, which is really nice. You also grow in what you see. So that's a nice thing about being the treasurer. And then I was also leading the admin team. So I think that's all the skills that I learned from being in the business of how to be efficient, of how to get things done, move them forward. Especially when you're the head of the admin team, you can move people forward, which I also like doing. So I think that was something that I learned. But then the general disposition of how to get a business going helps now with the church plant, because what we ought talk about, I don't want to say risks, I would say it's challenges, because there's nothing to lose. God's in control. So whatever he wants to come into your life does come. You don't need to call it a risk. So of course, how to overcome those challenges. I was thinking about the picture this morning also. My wife, Anne, I'm volunteering that information. She's doing an adult swim lesson. And one of the things that when you're learning to swim is that you also do slow, deliberate moves instead of the panic moves, because that keeps you under the water. I think it's the same thing that I learned in business, that when you get trouble, don't start doing different things. Just quietly keep on doing your thing. The Lord will do it on his own schedule. So if we run into things in the church, we just wait upon the Lord. One example is I shared that also earlier when we were looking for a place for the service. we didn't find, the first place we found was Salvation Army, but only Saturday night. So we kept on searching and looking. And I think it was 3 or 4 weeks time frame that we looked. And on the day before we wanted to make the decision, we said, okay, then let's go with Salvation Army. And then the Lord on the next day provided the place we're at now, where we can worship Sunday mornings. It's a really great place. And so we didn't go out of the box to do things. We just waited upon Him for our requests coming in. So I think that's what I learned from business and now try to do in the church.
I think for me, this is how I got connected, or that Aquila started with David and Nick and Max. Our talents, business entrepreneurs, but also we saw organizational lack within the church, but also a lot of churches needed more support in terms of maybe counseling or just simply a website or strategy that brought us together with Aquila and like, okay, let's mean something as an organization. But we never knew that Aquila would become this huge vision that, as we were thinking through all these things, actually the call for all of us, whether it's through business or working for a company, it has to point to the multiplication of churches and how does, as a business, can be beneficial to the church. And that's why then the BIMS and then the ATI came into that. And I was involved with that in terms of setting up, thinking through what kind of businesses or how we can raise up leaders through Aquila Initiative. How can we plant churches? I was very much involved with the church plant in Bonn, you know. But all these things, it was just how God used my passion for entrepreneurial thinking, business, in planting churches, you know, because we saw that planting churches, there are so many parallels in terms of starting a business. You know, it's a risk. You go somewhere, you have to have a team, you have to endure, you have to have faith that God wants to do this. You have to. There's a lot of these aspects, you know, management, you know. So this is where I was able to use my giftings through Aquila that was serving the local church, actually.
You're asking, I'm going back to the, see, I listen to these guys, I forget the question.
So yeah, the question is how, in the other way, how has what you learned in running a business, starting a business, served the church? How do those skills and the wisdom you learned transfer to ministry?
Well, I guess it's just the experiences that you go through and then carry those forward to the church to help leadership in the church. I always wondered why I was going to all different master type classes in leadership and finance, and I guess I have my answer now that, you know, as our home church, I've been on the leadership team for 15 years and just stepped down so we could do other ministries. But I use business organizations, principles, org charts, finance. So I guess that's how I applied that.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of questions, but I want to pause to see if anybody else here has a question they'd like to ask the group.
That was not scripted.
Spontaneous or no, unscripted.
So the question is, how does Zach stand out in a very saturated world of digital marketing, but also how does he stand firm in a market that's saturated with promoting lies or maybe the content we as Christians don't want to promote?
Yeah, I believe how I do it is you be grounded in the Word of God, know the truth, and recognize the truth from the lies and apply it. If you don't apply it in your life, you're not going to apply it in your work and another. And also, I think have a vision. What kind of business you want to be? I want to be a kingdom business. I want to be a business that promote Christ exalting values and principles. And then if you know these principles and you recognize them in the business world, they are not aligning up, then it's pretty easy. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but it's easy to make that decision for me. I mean, maybe it's easy, but you have to do it. There's a risk, because making certain decisions can maybe a monetary impact. Like, okay, I'm not going to do business with this person because their materials are highly sexual, for instance. So I don't want to partner with it because I don't want my work labor will lead other men into sexual temptation, for instance. Because there's always this sexual messaging. So for me, it's having, and this is something that me and Nick and with Aquila as well, but we worked on it. We created for ourselves a charter of principles and values that we want to live by as Christian entrepreneur. Like all these values that we as Christians have to live by, ethics, finance, exactly what you said. Christ exalting jobs, because there are even maybe products that we, as you start a business, you don't want to create these products because these products, not everything is good. God created everything, but we can make it or use it for bad motivations. What for me also helps is if it's really difficult, like it's very vague, because not everything is black and white. I ask my partners, the church. I have really good guys that I can say, like, I have this conundrum. This is difficult. What should I do? And they can speak truth in your life in terms of, because sometimes you don't see it. You know the truth for somebody, but you don't see it. But they then share that to me. But yeah, I hope this answers. 'Cause people here who know me knows I can continue, but I have to stop now.
Anybody else? So the question is, when your business is successful, how has that success or financial success challenged your faith? Yeah. Okay.
I just talked a lot.
Yeah, I think I partly addressed that already with how I manage my own, but I mean, the finance industry, there's a lot of money, and let's just take another picture. I always try to give pictures. So if we have an office space that we share with other people, so we're like 12 consultants who share an office space in the back office, kind of. And if you would meet up with those guys and they all have their Mercedes and BMW and Porsche, and I would drive up with my Daihatsu, there's that challenge that you're talking about. Who's your peer group? Who is looking at you, or whom are you ultimately responsible to? Coming back to stewardship. So it's the Lord that looks. And of course, there's a peer pressure that people drive these nice cars and look at you and you're the odd man out. Or you have like rankings where you can see what people earn. And if you to make the decision that I made, you will not be in the upper echelon there. You must be happy with being in the bottom half of the ranking, because you just don't put the time. And only because the Lord saved me, I am not chasing the carrot that will not bring any satisfaction. Only by His grace can I now say, hey, I let go of these things, of these idols, and put it in the kingdom. And I think you said it earlier, things we're sending on to the kingdom, invest the money where it really pays for eternity.
I think it starts with knowing what money is and the value of money, and if that's your motivation. Because in the end, if your starting point is, for starting a business, I want to make money, and you make money, or even when you go start a job, I want to have a job and make money. Money is the center point of your produce and your effort, And I'm not saying it's bad, but I mean, money. We need money, It's a tool. And we had this conversation in our breakout session. for us Christian, if you have a right understanding of money, then when you go into business or on the work floor, you don't start with the starting point, I need to make money. You start with, I want to glorify God with the talents that He's given me. And then I'm going to use that in the areas where He places me. And then I will make money, because making money is not bad. It's good. You start a business to make money. You don't want to lose money, because money can be used then for the kingdom of God. So, but if your starting point is, I want to glorify God with my business, because that's my calling, and I want to make money, so that the money can bless the kingdom, so that the money can be supporting my family. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you have a right understanding what money is. And that, I think we can fall easily in the trap. Oh, I have a lot of money, or I'm making a lot of money. Not that I am, but I'm just saying, but business is to make money. But like I mentioned that already. So I hope that answers the question.
Dan?
So the progression probably has been, and the start of business that, you're trying to generate more capital to grow your business, to now when you get to more mature level, that now I think, oh man, I hope I make enough this year so I can continually support what missions we like to do, and how can I support them even more. So the thinking has changed again from me to storing riches in heaven, I guess you'd say. And that's part of the faith journey, you would say.
And I would just add, for me personally, financial success has never, ever once in my life challenged my faith. You go into ministry, that'll never be a challenge.
That was
You'll have other challenges, but it won't be financial.
That was deep, guys. That was deep.
For me personally. I can't speak for every pastor, but for me personally. Great. Anybody else? Yeah, Terry. So the question then, if I can summarize, let me know if I understood your question correctly. Someone who just has a job because I took the job because I have to make money. That was my motive in taking the job. It's a shift job. It's whether it's you're making something and you earn a certain amount from making that thing. The motive is I need to make money. How then do I look at that as glorifying God? Am I understanding you? How do I change my thing to think even this very simple job that I need to do right now to make money, how is this glorifying God? Am I understanding the question? Like, how do I make the shift to look at it differently? Yeah. Okay.
Good time.
So I look at that as, who are you working for? Are you working for which boss? Are you working for the Lord? The biblical says that you work for the Lord, not for your immediate boss, although he can fire you. So that's a hard mindset, especially in maybe a job that isn't very fulfilling. But I would say that if you work that way, that you would probably be promoted fairly quick, because you work differently than anyone else, whether you're on the assembly line or whatever, and you would get noticed by, your boss, unless the devil's working and hit through him and said, oh, this guy's way too good, we got to get rid of him. That's just my thinking.
I would say I can't help you with the mindset. I think that's probably just something that happens over time, but just going to the same direction. If you look at Ephesians 5 and you see, okay, how are you to behave as the slave to your master? And then having this view of the Lord as being your boss. And then for me, it's like, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. And if you're doing those things, then you're already doing it to His glory without you maybe at this point you're realizing it. So I think as long as you're doing it, even if you're not aware of it, that's fantastic already. I think that's what we are all looking for in doing our secular jobs, if there's something like a secular world at all. And so, but maybe you can, in prayer, remind yourself of that truth. I mean, it's all about being reminded of something that changes your mindset. I think it's not like snap and then it will change. I think it's all about being in prayer, being in communion with the Lord over this thing, and then it will change your mindset.
And Colossians 3:17 says, "No matter everything you do all to the glory of God." And that's the thing. It's not just a matter of the things we think about over and over, the things we meditate on inform our emotions, and we make decisions out of our emotions. So I'm working, but I hate this job. I'm just doing it to get it done because I hate it. Why? Because in your head, you're just thinking of all the reasons you hate this job. You just want to get it done. And so all of those thoughts are informing your emotions. And then you're acting out in a way that is not glorifying to God. But if you reverse engineer that to what Paul says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God. This is your spiritual act of worship. And you can say, wow, I can sit here while I'm doing this job. Maybe you have a job you could do with your eyes shut. Maybe you can do it and you could think about 10 other things. Maybe one of those things is memorizing scripture. And so you're filling your heart with true thoughts of God. God, you are so great. You're providing for my family. You are a great God. And I do this to your glory. And so all of a sudden that sovereignty of God in your life says, I'm here in this moment and he's given me this job to make much of God. And then so the mindset gets changed through seeing a right view of God, having your mind and your thoughts on God, which creates a different set of emotions, which creates a different set of outworking. And I agree with Dan. If you look at the story of Joseph, everything he did, he had a pretty bad job. You know, he had prison ministry for a while, and then he worked as a slave for this Potiphar guy, ended up getting a prison ministry, but he did all of those things, and he did them in a way that was glorifying to God. He did them in such a way that God used it to elevate him to the point of being second only to the king. And so, not that that's the goal or that's going to be the future for everyone, but I do think if you do things in a way where you put God first, it changes the way you approach your work. And I think God blesses those. And obedience, I would reverse that. Sorry, blessing always follows obedience. Blessing in your work, blessing in your family. So,
what I want to add to that is, I think you need a paradigm shift, which is the reason why you work there. I think, do you view your job as a place where you make money, or do you view your job as a place where God called you to be? Because if you view, like, God placed me here, it's without his sovereignty, you wouldn't be there, right? So if you think about that, then, okay, God placed me there. What am I called to do there? And therefore, the Bible's full of principles. The biggest one is go and make disciples. How do you do that at your job? You know, how are you living out these Christian values? I mean, you have to meditate on it. You have to think through that. And sometimes we don't take time of why did God place me in that company, or this place? Have I really thought through how God can use me here for his kingdom? Because maybe it's just 2-3 years and you move on to another job. You can think then later on, what kind of impact have I left for the kingdom at that job? Have I been a faithful servant, with the talent that he has given me, So I think it is good to and again, I think, know the word of God. The word is full of how a person who is called to live out his life at the platform places where God has called you. And that's where the local church comes into place, and being rooted in a life group and discipled and having brothers or sisters where you can ask for advice, like, oh, I'm tempted with this at work, and money is an issue. Or like, can you give me some wisdom? And that helps you to establish a right pattern how to function at the place where you're working, I think.
This brings actually that question is a great segue to my next question, and that is, practically speaking, running your own company it is hard work, and it calls you to invest a lot more time than, say, if you had a 9-to-5 at a corporation, because a lot of times you don't just punch out. You work and you think, and you think about working maybe long hours in the day. And so you become to challenge we call it the balancing of life, where you have your work life, your private life. So you have your family, and that goes for people who are married, but also people who are single. You still have your family, and you also have your family, your church family. So a lot of times in churches, people who are business owners can get a lot of flack and maybe extra pressure because they feel like, they have to serve their church, but they also have all these responsibilities as a business owner. So how do you guys go about balancing, if you want to call it the word balance, but live out that faith and that balance between my work life, that family life, my church ministry? How you can also talk about things you've learned about doing it wrong, or the extreme of one or the other, and what are some lessons you've learned in balancing those kind of three areas of our lives, or three responsibilities, I should say?
People expect me to talk.
No.
Well, I do try to not work on Sunday, especially on Sunday. As a single person, I can do a whole lot of more work than a married man, So I try to use that then as well. But aspects I really focus on aspects as a single man that at the time that I would have spent to your family, I really try to think that I set that apart for the church, at least, in terms of, like, I'm an elder, I lead a life group, and I'm part of Aquila Initiative, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing that I know certain married couples or a guy or whoever is involved won't be able to do that. I disciple while also doing everything else I'm doing, Is it perfect? No. No way. But again, it is good to how you say, have the how do you say, the North Star, your direction, this is where I want to get at, and sometimes you have to reevaluate, am I doing this through prayer and scripture, and refocus, what am I actually doing, how am I contributing to the church, or is my work my God? Because sometimes it becomes a God, you don't even realize it, and then you have to, like, oh no, this is because you're so absorbed by it, and yeah, maybe that answers it.
Well, at this point in my life, I don't have to, take time off for the kids. But I do take time off for the grandkids, and it's somewhat difficult to get them to go with me. But when they do, they see the value. So that's how I try to balance it, just to take the kids with your grandkids or your own kids. It takes more time. They slow you down, but you need to pass on what you learned and what your values are, and that's the best way to do it.
I didn't want to go first because I had a different approach, because I talked already about how to cut back on the business to balance it. So it's not the same situation maybe the other two guys are in. If you say, hey, I'm doing less work, so of course you can balance it in a different way because you have the flexibility to cut back on the working hours and then pour more into the church to have more time. And I think when it comes to family life, the Lord, it's a little bit what you said, the Lord decided not to give us children. If we would have children, we would have a lot more to do in that regard. So we could, different kind of blessings. We have this time now to pour it into the church, dedicated. And I think what we also, maybe we are half a step too far in how much time we do spend. Because when it comes to how much time do we have, we used to have date night every week, and now it's like, oh, where do we slot it in? So maybe we have to do a little bit of a reassessment there, or maybe it's just the time when you're part of the church that you just don't have enough time. But I think it's, as you said, you have to reassess it over time and see where you're at, and then just set your priorities in the right way.
Yeah, I think this question it's an important one, no matter what line of work you're in, even as someone who's in ministry, you can justify a lot of ministry, and you can justify not spending time with your family and your kids because, well, I'm doing the Lord's work. And so this is one of those times that I think it's important. If you're married, you really submit to the gifts and the role that God has given your spouse. And so when she puts up the red flag and says, warning, your kids have been fatherless for a few weeks, you need to re-engage, or hey, we need to take time as a family, or we haven't spent any time together, you have to submit to that. And you don't say, well, we'll get to that. The people you love the most, you take the most for granted. And so I think it's very important. And I think as a single person, I see this a lot. Single people in our church culture can be workaholics because you have nothing but time on your hands. And definitely during the pandemic, you all got home office. And so you just camped out and then you just engaged and you were just doing work 24/7. You just slept next to your desk. You woke up and you got back to work. And you have to be able to disengage to say, I have a lot of gifts and abilities that God has given me, and I need to engage in the lives of others or allow others to speak into my life, to trust the Lord. God gave us a Sabbath for a reason. God didn't have to rest on the seventh day, but he did to demonstrate to us that we are called to rest because it's a demonstration of our total dependence on him. That we can rest in God and rest that everything is going to work out according to his plan and his purposes for his glory. And we can rest that he is a good God providing for us. I don't have to work, but I can actually, he wants us to enjoy the gifts of family, the gifts of church fellowship. And so I think a question like that is important for us because when you think entrepreneurial thinking, or you think starting a business or being self-employed or working for a company, you can let that work be your identity. And that's not your identity. Your identity is in Christ. And so I really appreciate that. Any other questions before Stephen and Beth? Beth first. All right, so the question revolves around someone who has ideas. How do you evaluate whether you're the right person to fulfill this idea? And number two, if you are that person and you try, how do you evaluate failure and when you should be handing it off to somebody else? Did I summarize that pretty good?
You mean you working for a company or as an entrepreneur? I'm not really understanding in terms of what do you want to get at,
So in terms of the idea, I think that it's not so much about the context because the principles would apply to any context.
Okay.
So you have an idea to try something, whether it be in ministry or in a job, and you take that idea. How do you evaluate whether you're the right person for it or whether you should hand it off? And secondly, if you do try and it just seems like you keep making mistakes, how do you evaluate whether God's saying, no, keep going, eventually you're going to break through, or when are you going to learn how to hand this off to somebody else?
I think in all cases, I would always surround myself with brothers and sisters who know you very well at first and then pray through it. And then, of course, bring people around you as well who might be doing what you're doing. I don't know if you have this original idea and then no one has done it before kind of idea, then of course it's difficult to bring people, but still bring people who might be having input and assess with you if that's a good idea, and then assess your skills that you have. And it might not be necessarily that you hand it all over. Maybe you just need support. Like we talked about collaboration. So maybe you just need to have a support cast who can move you in the right direction. And when it comes to failure, the same thing. You have people around you and maybe also people who are in a certain industry that are similar, who could just point you and say, hey, there are clear indications that this thing is not going to fly. Of course, it's just not fly. Or not, yeah.
I also think everything he said, but I also think, do you have passion for it? Do you recognize that you have the talent for it? Because if you see something, you have ideas, but it's like, man, I cannot do that, or actually I don't have the passion for it, I don't think you should try it, Okay, obviously depends what it is in the context. Maybe you don't have a choice. Sometimes you're in a context of work where you don't have much of a choice and you have to do something. So then you pray through and see and ask like, why is God allowing me through such a situation, and I think these areas are all faith builders, to trust the Lord, like what is he doing in this moment in my life, in that section. Same thing with failing. I think, and I had it again in our panel, it's good to fail. I think it's good. Like, not, it's nice, but you learn from your failures, right? We say that often, especially a businessman, how many times they have started something and it's like, wow. And then they learn from it and they do something else. And I don't know, many of these, especially super successful people, you only know what they have been successful of, but you don't know of all the things that they had tried that just were failures, failing or not failures. And so I wouldn't be scared of failures, but learn from them, and at some point, and I think it's through prayer, wisdom, and reading the Word and how God is moving you. You just make a decision, because if God really, if you believe that God really is leading you and is with you, I think so. I think it's good to just say like, I don't think this is for me, and that will also, I believe, be confirmed along the way,
That makes sense.
These guys had good answers. I don't have anything to add.
Wow, he's the real businessman to me. Have you seen these companies?
You learned how to lead.
Yes.
I think the humility to take criticism, like positive criticism, people are going to challenge your ideas. And this is something, as someone who is naturally a connector, I love to build relationships. I, by nature, take all criticism personally. And I think you don't believe in me. You're asking me these questions. You're challenging me because you don't believe in my vision. And I've learned over the years that's not true. They actually may, in fact, love your idea and want to see you succeed. And they're asking hard questions because they're helping you shape that. So allowing others to shape that vision, to shape that idea that you're going after, and to speak into your life, to build your character. So that going back to the character of the mindset of someone who collaborates is they're humble and they're teachable, meaning that they're going to be able to receive challenge. And I'm only speaking as someone who really, I still do have to wrestle when somebody challenges me or points out, you don't do that very well. You say you want to do that, but you stink at that. And it's like, well, that's hard. It's really hard, but I think it's so helpful in giving it back over to the Lord and saying, Lord, have you called me this to or not? So I think it's a great question. Yeah, definitely.
I think you said something very good. How do you know you don't have it? You assess yourself already on something you maybe, like somebody else would say, like, man, you're so good at it. Sometimes you are too self-critical. And that creates, or that allows us to never make the decision to try something, because it's like, oh, I'm not good at it, but you never maybe shared it with somebody. It's like, actually, you're pretty good at it,
Stephen, do you still have your hand up? So what were the initial challenges you had to overcome? And what motivated you to keep going, to keep being a serial entrepreneur?
Well, I guess it'd be a little bit like Winston Churchill. What would he say? Never, 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 never give up. I guess I had that type of mindset. And if things weren't working, then to change them a little bit, to make it work. And when I say make it work, yeah, both financial workings, and then the other would be the labor logistics part of that. So being driven, I was going to make it work. I guess that was what I kind of remember back when I started. And if something didn't work, that was failure. Okay, we're going to fix it. so that it will somehow work. And in a commodity business that I'm in, you have lows and highs in markets. So if it was a low market, you were betting and hoping that the market then would turn around and go back higher, which it normally does in a cycle. So what sometimes starts out as a year that looks really bad ended up being a better year than you anticipated. And just the opposite. What you start out with looking like a good year turns out to be not so good. But over the long term, in the commodity market, the low-cost producer always wins in the long run. So that was some of the things that I worked through to try to make it work. You're making me think back too far.
All right. Well, we are coming to the end of our time today, and I really appreciate all the dialogue that we've had. And thank you for you guys coming up and sharing the things that God has taught you, and for Dan and Liz coming all the way from Sterling, Illinois, to be here with us. And so I'd like to conclude the time with a word of prayer.